Hey y'all, how you doing? This is podcast number 1 for YouTube. Hey YouTube, how y'all doing? Um I just wanted to sort of introduce myself. Those of you on YouTube who are finding me via YouTube, my name is Steve. I forecast the weather as a hobby for the Eastern United States. I've been doing this for 15 years and well, I'm now starting to sort of branch out a little bit here. And the big reason I'm doing this is for those of you who are watching on Facebook, um, this is primarily because Facebook is deciding that after 30 days, they're going to be removing live stream videos. So we are going to go ahead and post these onto YouTube now. So uh, I want to just say hi to the YouTube community, and we'll sort of talk a little bit from now on about the weather here on YouTube as well. So, um, by the way, for those of you in the weather group, welcome back. So, these were our highs today. Our highs were very nice. It was another beautiful day today. We saw temperatures in most of Massachusetts in the 40s to near 50 degrees. A couple areas got a little bit above 50 degrees. New York City got into the upper 50s today. Philly got near 60. DC was up over 60 degrees. Baltimore was up over 60 degrees. Fredericksburg got to about 67 here in southeastern Virginia. We got well into the mid and upper 60s today, approaching 70 degrees. And we talked about some 70s as we worked our way down into North Carolina, northern North Carolina, up to about Rocky Mount. We were anywhere between 68 and 72. You work your way south of Rocky Mount, and you started working your way up over 72. We started actually working our way into the mid 70s today. And you go south of Fayetteville, and you were starting to work your way up towards 80. Yeah, what a day, huh? It was a beautiful, beautiful day. Just absolutely gorgeous, and just picture perfect. And the big question on everybody's minds right now is winter over? That's the title of this first podcast. Our active weather pattern that we dealt with over through a good chunk of February is now behind us. What do we have on the horizon? Do we have more winter weather, right? Or is winter starting to come to an end here? Well, I have my own sort of views here. And those of you on YouTube will not know this. Those of you on Facebook know that I am not a fan of March storms. It's not to say that they don't happen, okay? But 95% of the time, big, bolsterous March storms, when it comes in terms of snow, very rarely happen. And some people point towards the winter of 2018. Okay, yeah, right. That was 1 year where it ended up working out. And in some areas, it still didn't completely work out the way that data was expecting. I remember model data through that 4-week period in March printing out totals up over 30, 40, 50 inches in some areas. You ended up getting pretty much half of that in some areas, and in some cases you got even less than that. So I wouldn't put a whole heck of a lot of stock into getting big March storms. They can happen, and there will be more that will happen, but you got to have a perfect setup. All right. You really have to have a perfect setup for big, huge March snowstorms. That's the cold hard truth. And anybody, all right, and I'm primarily talking to the weather community. Look, guys, I love you. All right, but you get a little much sometimes. All right, you really do. I mean, it's crazy. Okay, but I want us to take a step back as some of you may or may not know, all right, in my weather community that I have, or in my Facebook group, I've talked about this before. I have the stool that I use when it comes in terms of forecasting, and this is the stool, all right? You have 3 legs of the stool, right? Here's your stool, here's your 3 legs, okay? And the first leg is climate and historical weather of an area, all right? And we're going to get into that because I think sometimes people don't realize that there are different climate zones in the United States, or well, in the United States, there's a bunch of different ones, but in the eastern United States, there are 5 different climate zones. Okay. So that climate is going to play a very huge role. And then also historical weather of an area in a given period of time, right? So if we look at, all right, we'll take, for example, the New York to Boston corridor, okay? And you look at a piece of model data printing out 12 to 18 inches of snow in the month of March, okay? Chances of that happening on any given year, right? Because those are some of the biggest totals that have happened from a March snowstorm, okay? Those are the biggest totals that you've received in one storm or one event in month of March from New York to Boston. Chances of something like that happening is that's your top 5% of all March storms, right? So you go back through all of the years where you had a winter storm in March, 12 to 18, and a model producing 12 to 18 inches is pretty much the maximum. All right. So if you start seeing data going higher than that, that's kind of, you start having some questions about that. Okay. 95% of the time, you get less than 12 to 18 inches. And most of the time, where most of the storms end up falling in the month of March, is somewhere around that 1 to 3, 2 to 4 range. Unlike when you get into the other parts of the year, you typically see a 4 to 8, 6 to 12 type storm, New York to Boston, right? So everybody needs to sort of lower their expectations, sort of diminish their grandiose view on how things are going to pan out. Because if weather has taught me one thing, climate and history is a huge piece, right? But another big piece is, of course, the weather pattern. Okay, the weather pattern. Can you produce a storm, a big monstrous blizzard, in a progressive pattern? No. And then, of course, the technical details of an event. And this you can't really know until you really get close into an event, right? So these get ironed out later as you get closer. The weather pattern, usually you know approximately 10 days or so before the event happens. This you know pretty much all the time, right? This you know about 10 days before an event. And this you know like within 3 days, okay? So obviously the technical details will get ironed out over time. But you have to understand this, and this goes for any type of weather that you're forecasting, but particularly storm systems, right? So when everybody's talking about, because I'm seeing how some people are on social media trying to bump up this possible threat for sometime between the 7th and the 10th of March. It's not really screaming anything significant. And we're going to get into why I believe this, but let's kind of talk a little bit about something for a minute. By the way, let me bring you to let me bring you if we go a little bit to the north here, and we go to the latest temperatures right now, southern New England, you're in the lower to middle, you're in kind of like the middle 30s. There is a little bit of an event happening tonight up in New England. Is it going to be a lot of snow? Probably not. Probably not. Um, but you can kind of tell where you kind of have a boundary set up. Have a boundary set up somewheres in here. Somewheres in here. Right? And here you have a little bit of a boundary. North of this boundary are in the 30s and even 20s in some cases. South of this boundary, you're in the 40s and 50s, right? And even some 60s in North Carolina. So you have a boundary in here, and that's sort of something that you have to watch out for. But this warm air aloft is coming in pretty rapidly. So even though that you got cold air up in here, it's gonna warm up. Okay. So you go further to the north, and obviously it's colder up there. You're in the teens and 20s, right? That's where you're closer to the source cold. But I want to get into this map, okay? Because the climate zones of the East are important, okay? And not many people know this, okay? And I've driven from far northern New York, far northern New Hampshire, far northern Maine. I've visited there. And I've gone as far south as Florida. So I've been everywhere in between, right? And I've seen the different climate zones, all right? And I think it's important that it's important to talk about, okay? Because the expectations that you have in, let's say, far northern New England are going to be a lot different than the expectations that you're going to have even in New York City, but certainly once you get south of DC, okay? So you can kind of see it on the map, but it only has like little dots here and there. But the first climate zone goes from the Adirondacks into the northern Green Mountains, into the White Mountains, the Main Mountains, far northern Maine, like this. That is the first zone. And in this first climate zone, this is the subarctic region. Cold summers, a lot of snow, or cool summers, very cold winters, a lot of snow. Okay, that is zone number 1. Zone number 2, all right, it comes down like this. It goes through the northern tier of Pennsylvania, the Poconos, west of Albany. All right, the Hudson Valley is out of it, or not in this zone. The Berkshires, the Pioneer Valley is not in this zone. The Worcester Hills, and away from southeast New Hampshire, even away from Manchester and Nashua. And then it goes through the rest of Maine like this. This zone here, we're going to call it zone number 2. All right. It's called humid continental. And there's 2 humid continental climates in the east. But this zone number 2 is actually, I might actually call this HC1. This is SA up here. That's for subarctic. This is HC1. HC1 is categorized by cold winters and mild summers. Okay? Not cool summers like in the subarctic region. Mild summers, meaning it can get warm at times, but most of the time it's not too hot in this region or in this zone. You get into this zone in here, which encompasses most of the region. But I'm going to be a little different, and I'm actually going to take this to include Baltimore, all of Delaware, and all of New Jersey. So it comes like this, and then it goes through the northern half of Kentucky, all of Indiana, all of central and all of northern and central Missouri, as well as most of Kansas. All right. It includes all of Ohio. This is what's called HC2. Okay. HC2. So HC2 is another humid continental climate. And this is, they call it hot summers. I'm going to call it warm summers, cool winters. Okay. Not mild winters, because it still gets pretty cold in this area. But cool winters. And I won't call them hot summers because it's nowhere near as in our next zone that we're going to talk about. But HC2 is definitely a zone where you get cool winters and warm summers. Okay. And both the HC zones, so HC1 and HC2, they're called humid continental because you can get some humidity, right? Especially during the summertime. And also you get precipitation, right? It's not an arid sort of climate, right? And we all know this, right? We're not in an arid climate. Then we get into so this is 1, 2, 3. We get into our third zone. There's actually 4 zones. You have 1, 2, 3. We're into our fourth zone, right? Fourth zone. 1, 2, 3, 4. Our fourth zone encompasses, if you look at this, it encompasses the whole entire southeast. Now, this map brings this zone way up to like Baltimore and including parts of New Jersey and Delaware. I'm not going that high. I'm going to include maybe DC, but that certainly this climate zone is from Fredericksburg south and south of Delaware. Okay. And then it includes parts of southern West Virginia, central and southern Kentucky, maybe the far tail end of Indiana and Illinois, certainly southern Missouri, southern Kansas, and it includes all of central and eastern Oklahoma, eastern Texas, all of Louisiana, all of Arkansas, all of Mississippi, most of Tennessee, all of Georgia, all of Alabama, most of Florida, all of South Carolina, and most of North Carolina, and central and southern Virginia. This climate is the subtropical. Subtropical. Okay. This is your subtropical climate. Okay. Subtropical climate. What does this mean? This means hot summers. And I'm not talking like what you see up in here. Hot summers, mild winters, high humidity. Okay. Very high humidity in these zones. And people say, well, what about the humidity further north? It's nowhere near the sorts of humidity that you experience in the subtropical zone of the United States. And then you get into far southern Florida and you have the pure tropical climate. This is purely tropical in southern Florida, meaning you have a dry season and a wet season. And actually, most of Florida experiences this. So theoretically, you might actually be able to, if you really wanted to, you could probably go something like this for the subtropical zone. Okay, that could be your subtropical zone. And everywhere south of Gainesville in Florida, okay, with all of like central and southern Florida being in a tropical climate. This could all be tropical. Tropical. Because once you get north of I-4, you don't really see as much of a dry and wet season in northern Florida as you do in central and southern Florida. This is definitely purely a tropical climate down here. In here, it's subtropical, meaning you don't have a dry and wet season, right? But it's very warm, very warm. Um, and oftentimes in this tropical zone, you can actually be a little cooler during the summer because you're in the wet season. To where in the subtropical climate, you get full blown heat and humidity during the summertime. Full blown, full blown. Now, this zone in here from DC, Delaware, southern New Jersey, and a good chunk of central and eastern Maryland. This zone in here is kind of like a transition. It's kind of a mix of both subtropical and also humid and humid continental, meaning that during the winter, it is possible that you can get a little cooler than the subtropical zone and a little bit, and obviously more snow. But also during the summertime, you can get pretty darn hot and humid. All right. So these areas aren't fully subtropical, but they're also not fully humid continental either because they don't get quite cold and snowy enough to be considered humid continental, but they don't get mild enough during the winter to be truly subtropical either. When you talk about truly subtropical, you have to go south of Fredericksburg for that. All right. And the way that you know southeastern Virginia, northeastern North Carolina is fully in this zone, you start seeing in some areas palm trees. All right. You see palm trees around these parts. All right. And this is about the far most northern extent that you get palm trees naturally. Okay. And there is different sorts of flora. And I'm talking about all of this, right? You say, well, Steve, why the hell are you talking about the climate zones? I really don't care about that. Well, it matters. All right. These things matter because you always have to talk about the backdrop of a climate when you're talking about longer range forecasting and when you're talking about, is winter done or not, right? So this is where we start transitioning into actual data. First piece of data that I'm going to show you, this is where right now first leaves have come out. And you notice that right along pretty much I-40, first leaves have been observed. I'm going to tell you within the week, this is going to start spreading across southeastern Virginia and the eastern shore. And the reason I know this is because my allergies are starting to kick in. And you say, well, maybe that's just you. Maybe you got a sickness or something. Maybe there's something like that. This was posted today by one of the local weather stations here one of the local stations here in southeastern Virginia. And it is not just me. I've been feeling something going on lately. And I know I'm not getting sick because I don't have a fever. But yes, tree pollen is relatively high. Not high, but it's in the medium range. Meaning trees are starting to release pollen. And trees only do that when they're comfortable enough that the weather is warm enough for that. And if you say, well, maybe there's going to be a cold snap or this or that, I'm going to tell you something right now. Based on everything that I'm seeing, there's a reason the trees are starting to release their pollen here in southeastern Virginia, and it's not because there's more winter to come. All right. Historically speaking, actually, the trees start doing this in mid-February. So we're actually a little late this year. And the reason we're late this year is because of two factors. All right. One, we had such a cold January this year down here in Virginia. colder than normal. That's number one. Number two, we also had a late season snowstorm. Okay. So those two factors sort of hindered how long and just how late these first leaves are going to pop up. But they are going to pop up. There's no question that over the next week this whole area is going to get filled in. And the reason I know that is because this week has just been so dramatically warm. And you say, well, what about next week and this and that? It's only for the cool downs that we're going to get are only going to last a day or two. Maybe if you're lucky, 3 days. And during the day, we're not going to be dropping below 40 degrees in these zones. So you're going to get leaves starting to spread from Richmond to Rocky Mount, where leaves haven't quite popped yet, but they are. Okay. And the way we know that they're going to come out pretty soon is because the trees are already releasing the pollen. So there's certainly buds on the trees. There's no question about that. I actually started seeing them budding earlier on in February. So there's buds on the trees, but now they're starting to release the pollen, which they only do that when they're comfortable enough to do so. So why do I mention this? Well, if you have buds on the trees and they're pollinating and in some cases you got your first leaves popping up, is there a theoretic chance that you could get more winter? Obviously, but I think Mother Nature is trying to tell us where pretty much spring is over with. All right. Or excuse me, where winter is over with, I mean. So I want to leave us on that before we get into the actual weather data. But I said I was going to start showing this as we go along, as we move along through the spring here and see how this progresses north. I would say by the beginning of March, all of southeastern Virginia and all of North Carolina and all of Tennessee and all of northern Arkansas will be covered in the first leaves popping up. Pollen season here in Virginia, southeastern Virginia, starts typically in mid-February and lasts until about usually the beginning to the middle of April. Going to be about a week behind this year. So it's going to we're having it start in late February. It's probably going to go until mid to late April this year. But everything's going to get held back a little bit because of how cold things were here. But it's going to start popping up and you're going to see that. Okay, let's get into the weather data. And actually, I'm going to bring up before I do anything, we're going to actually start with the short range data. And we're going to kind of see what's going to be happening here. And I'm going to kind of take you through here. I'm going to zoom into New England because, you know, some people are talking about how this thing is going to be crazy. I don't see it. Yeah, the elevations. Get ready. But notice how you're starting to mix. See how you're mixing even in the elevated areas? You're not going to get a lot of snow out of this. All right. Maybe in the Adirondacks where you're below freezing, right? We saw that. But you're not going to get a crap ton of snow with this in southern New England, right? You might get a little bit of snow in the Berkshires. Okay. You might get some snow in the Berkshires. But notice this isn't producing copious totals. Even in the Adirondacks, even in the White Mountains and the Green Mountains, you're getting maybe at most 2 to 4 inches if you're lucky. It's not a lot of snow, guys. And you're getting a lot of sleet mixing in. You might even be talking about a little bit of a light glaze, but it's not a lot. All right. This thing isn't going to be producing copious amounts of snow with it. So keep that in mind as we're running through the weather data. That this thing is just you're not going to be getting a lot with this. And then you're going to be going over to rain. See that in southern New England by the morning tomorrow? You're already raining. Yeah, it's not much of anything. All right. Central Maine and New Hampshire might get a nice little burst of snow, right? If you look at this 1 hour snow rates under this band, but this could also be sleet. I caution. This could also be sleet. Let's look at the I'm sure there's something that's going to tell us um you know you might want to be a little cautious here on that. Even in Maine, you might be dealing with a little bit of mixing, even with this big band that's showing up on the high resolution data. Right? This might have to be shifted a tick to the north. But it's possible that it goes from Conway to Portland. You might have a nice band in here. So we'll see what happens. But if you are under that band, yeah, you'll get possibly 2, 3, 4 inches if you're under that band. But other than that, it's not going to be a lot. It's not going to be a lot of snow with this. And southern New England, you're going to basically be getting nothing much. Coating if you're lucky. So this is nothing much. Model data was really hyping this thing up, showing that it was going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches. In some cases, it didn't end up panning out. So that's been sort of the case all year. Okay, now I'm going to bring us into the data, the real data, and I can guarantee you, yeah, see, the data is going higher. The GFS is going much higher than what's actually going to happen with this. And that kind of shows you just how biased these data are. But let me show you here. We're going to go into the temperature data. And I guess we'll go to the maximum temperatures here. I'm going to try to go quickly here through this. We're going to go through all of the data. So tomorrow, it's going to be another nice day in southern New England, although we'll see how much cloudiness we get, but definitely going to be a warm day. Central and southern mid-Atlantic, it's going to be a warm day in the southeast. It's going to be a great day. Behind the front on Friday, it doesn't cool down all that much. It does cool down in New England a little bit into the 30s and into the 30s, 40s south, 20s and 30s north. You get way north, right, up in here into our subarctic region of the east. You're very, very cold. You're in the teens, right? But meanwhile, you look at our subtropical zone, which is in here, and notice all of our 50s and 60s and even 70s on Friday behind a so-called front, right? So keep that in mind. Saturday's going to be another nice day. We're going to see possibly 50s in southern New England, 60s to near 70, Virginia, North Carolina. And then we get a front move through. And I think, some data's saying that Sunday will be really cold here in Virginia. I think this is a little bit more realistic. All right. Middle 40s. I think it is going to end up getting to about 45. From I-64, I-64 point south, you're going to be 45 plus. Okay, you're going to be 45 plus. North of there, you're going to struggle to get to 45. That's on Sunday. On Monday, I think we start working our way close to 50 here in southeastern Virginia. You're going to work your way close to 40 up in northern Virginia. You're going to work your way a little bit below 40 in south central Pennsylvania, southern New Jersey. You start going north, you're below freezing, and you're in the teens in the subarctic region. All right. That's on Monday. Tuesday, we're starting to warm things back up. We're starting to get those temperatures back up to near 60 degrees. You're back up into the middle 40s in southern New England, right? And then you look at Wednesday, and this is going to be a very nice day. I think the data is underdoing, actually, the temperatures for Wednesday. I think it's going to be warmer than this, especially if you can get some sunshine in on Wednesday. If you can get some sunshine, it's going to be much warmer than this. You're going to probably be about 5 to 10 degrees warmer than this. But if there's more clouds, you won't quite get that warm. Notice the massive frontal system moving through. But notice behind the front on the 7th, what front are you talking about? Now, notice in New England, you can clearly see how cold it is. And for those of you watching on YouTube, we don't I haven't mentioned this yet, but those of you watching from my weather group, say it with me. The 40-degree north latitude line, long and north of there, winter is back. It's coming back for the 7th. You see that? But even it's cooler, right, in central and southern Virginia and in the DC area where you're below 50. But you notice just how much these temperatures are just struggling to get much below 50 degrees, right? And then you get to the 8th, and then you're warming back up to around 60 or in the 40s in New England, right? And I'm seeing this trend, and this is by the 10th now, and it's so there's a pattern change coming around the 11th, 12th time frame. All right. See that? That's around the 11th. There's going to be a massive pattern change with a massive, massive warm front coming north. All right. That's going to be a massive warm front coming north. This is going to be serious. And look at these temperatures. Someone's getting up to 80 degrees with this look. I'm going to tell you right now, someone's getting to near 80. This is going to be, if you get this sort of boundary, these are the types of boundaries in early spring that can really be tough. Okay. This sort of boundary is a nasty boundary. All right. Nasty boundary. You're talking winter here, almost summertime down in here. Now, this is one of those sorts of situations where if you can get a little wave of low pressure to kind of come up and around like this, holy smokes, watch out for that. But again, problem is, right, I'm telling you, that's a massive boundary. Wow. Wow. That is one of the most incredible boundaries that I've really ever seen. So you're talking 30s region wide across all of New England. You go south of the PA border into Virginia and you're jumping into summertime. That is one of the most remarkable boundaries I think I've seen. And this is a pure ridge in here. This is a pure intense ridge. Okay. But what's happening is you got cold air running up and around the ridge. This is a serious ridge coming in. And I'm telling you, if you live in south of I-64, along in south of I-64, do not expect this boundary to work its way that far south. All right. But this is a situation where New England and parts of the mid-Atlantic are going to be chilly. And in the meantime, Virginia, North Carolina are like in the middle of springtime. Look at Florida. Look at Florida in southern Georgia. This is full-blown summertime warmth. But, you go from southeastern Virginia through Alabama, Mississippi, central Georgia, most of South Carolina. All right. This is all 80-degree temperatures in here. 80s. 80s. So I'm telling you guys, all right, Mother Nature is really trying to. Now you say this is the only piece of data, and I say absolutely, right? But let's look at the Canadian. We'll go back to the 12Z. We don't have much data from the 0Z. This is tomorrow. It's going to be another great day. So here's the thing, okay? I look at this, right? And yeah, there's a cold day. The Canadian is a little bit more bullish, but I'm telling you right now, it's not lasting, the cold air. Then you get the front coming through, but look at after the front, you're still talking temperatures in the 50s. So that looks to me like it's probably going to be a pretty warm pattern that we're getting into. That's that. Let me bring up the ensembles, because as most of you know, I like talking about the ensemble data. And we're going to kind of start with the euro. All right, we're going to start with the euro. And we're going to kind of see where the boundaries are going to be set up here as we go through. You're going to notice it's not going to be nearly as extreme, all right? And in some cases it's a little warmer or a little cooler, but like, for example, Virginia and North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia aren't going to be showing nearly as high temperatures as what the GFS was just showing. And in New England, it's not going to be nearly as cold, but I've seen these boundaries take shape during the springtime, right? Where New England is like utterly chilly, and Virginia, North Carolina are just in full-blown spring mode, if not near summertime, right? So it is not uncommon for those sorts of boundaries to take shape. Notice this is on the 1st of March, and this is on Saturday. It's looking great to me. And there's that one cold day right here. All right, that one cold day. I think it's going to be warmer than what this is suggesting. This is 40 to 45 for most of North Carolina and Southern Virginia. I think it's going to be 45 region wide, with areas closer to the border down in here over 50 degrees. Over 50 degrees, I think. All right. Especially if you get full-blown sunshine. And the reason why is this time of the year that the sun is very powerful. Very, very powerful. All right. You really need some serious Arctic air to overcome this. And even when you do get it, it's hard to get much below 45 this time of the year. But up in New England, it's going to be chilly. All right. Look, it's you got more winter to go. All right. But notice last day, and we're already warming up, and I think we're going to be warmer than what this is suggesting. I think we're warming up to near 50 on Monday. All right. And then on Tuesday, we're up over 50 degrees. So it warms very, very quickly. All right. Meanwhile, in New England, you get a lot of cooler days. And then every once in a while, you get a day where it gets nice and warm, right? So, like, for example, next Wednesday, you're up near 50, right? So that's sort of what you see. And there's like a front that comes through on Thursday, but it only drops it a little bit, right? The real front is here, but see, it's not dropping much. See that? It's not dropping like how I would want to see it. Like, for example, for me to say like, oh yeah, there's definitely an Arctic air mass coming in, right? For like around the 9th. What I would want to see is this 40, actually, I would say probably the upper 30-degree contour line coming down all the way like this. Okay, that would be like the 38-degree contour line. And then like your 35-degree contour line coming down like this. And then your like 28-degree contour line coming down like this. And then like your 25-degree contour line coming down like this. You want to I'd want to see it about 10 degrees colder than this. And it's not that cold to me. This look ain't that cold. It ain't that cold. And a lot of times this time of the year, the upper levels of the atmosphere can have a trough, but at the surface it's not being realized because the solar energy this time of the year, especially further south you get, is just so powerful. It really is. It's so darn powerful. And I'm telling you, this cool down ain't gonna last long, because by the time we get to around the 11th, that's when we're talking about a serious pattern change. And the boundary to me looks like it's setting up somewhere in here, somewhere along I-90 to between I-80 and I-90, right? Yeah, see that? See that? There's a boundary. There's a boundary, like generally right along I-80 up to like it's coastal New England, right? South of there, you're in the 50s and 60s. North of there, you're in, you might get to 50 degrees. See, you got a colder look here. You got definitely a warmer look down in here. Your battle zone, the zone where it's like very tricky, is kind of in here, right? Between I-80 and like, between I-80 and like the PA border. This zone in here is like your tricky zone. And that's the end of the model. GFS Ensemble, this is going to bring us out a little bit. This is the newest one. So that's tomorrow, going to be a nice day. Friday, I mean, we're not seeing much of a cool down. Even in New England, it's not really much of a cool down. Upper 30s is not ridiculously below average for this time of the year. For Saturday, you have a front that's coming in. Behind the front, yeah, see, this is what I'm talking about. You're going to get mid 40s in here. You're going to get mid 40s. You're going to get mid 40s in here. You're going to be up near or over 50 degrees down in here. Down as far southern North Carolina, right along the South Carolina border. You're going to be about 45 degrees central and northern North Carolina into southern Virginia. That's what you're going to see. That's what you're going to see. You're going to be up near 50 on Monday. You're going to be up near 50 on Monday. But look at New England, right? I wanna really hammer this in, right? See how cold it is in New England? You're getting some real cold air. You're getting some real cold air. And even New York City, it's a cold day. Harrisburg, it's a cold day, right? You're struggling to get above freezing, right? New York City, you're not getting above freezing, right? And forget the overnight lows, all right? We don't even want to talk about that. New England, it's going to be another chilly day on Monday. Monday is going to be utterly cold. Here in Virginia, it's going to be a 50-degree day, which is a little cool, but, it's not bad, right? And this is why, even in our cold periods here in Southern Virginia, North Carolina, you're still going to have that pollen to get released by the trees, and you're still going to get you're going to still get growth, right? So this is why I truly and wholeheartedly believe areas along and south of I-64, spring is here. It is here, and it's here to stay. And you can clearly see that. I mean, it's glaringly obvious, right? It's glaringly obvious. This is fourth. We go through the period. You see these warm periods. The warm periods that we get here in Virginia, North Carolina, is up over 70 degrees. All right. So probably even in some cases approaching 75. Meanwhile, in New England, your warm days are up near 50. All right. But your days in the 30s and lower 40s outnumber those, right? So that's the issue. And, we're getting, yeah, I'm not really seeing it. I'm not really seeing it. So why don't I really see it? Well, let me bring up we'll go to the last one here. That's the Canadian. We'll go to the 24-hour max. These are tomorrow's temperatures. All right. These are tomorrow's temperatures. Very nice day. Friday's temperatures is going to be around 60 here in Southern Virginia, 40 New England. That's far northern New England. It's going to be around freezing. Saturday is going to be gorgeous. Saturday is going to be gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Going to be probably up over 7. I think it's going to get up over 70 here on Saturday in Southern Virginia, North Carolina. We're going to be nearing 50 in Southern New England. Sunday, a little cooler, right? You got a front coming in. It's going to be a little cooler. Monday, notice New England, very cold, but here in Virginia, it's chilly, but it's not bone-chilling cold, right? And it lasts a day, and here comes the warm air coming in on Tuesday, right? There's your 60s coming back into play. And then there's Wednesday where you're talking about temperatures up over 70 degrees again, 50s in New England, right? And then Thursday, we're going to have to watch, right, see what happens with this because you got the front coming in. That's going to hinder things. But behind the front, you're still talking about temperatures nearing 60. You're still around 50 up in New England. But then there comes your front, right, fully in by the end of next week, where you're talking about 30s in New England, 50s further south, right? And overall, as I look at this, yeah, and then now we're starting to, that's the warm-up that we're talking about. See that warm-up coming in? Now you're starting to see them 70s popping up. Yeah. So it's kind of the days are getting numbered when it comes in terms of winter time, right? So if I bring up the winter, right, and we bring up the total snow, one thing I want everybody to know is snow ratios in March are very, very low. So people will look at this and they'll say, oh, 5 inches in Springfield, or 4 inches in Albany, or 5.5 inches in Boston, or even 3 inches in New York City. I'm going to tell you something right now. Here's how your average snow ratios go this time of the year. Average, right? Sometimes it can be lower, but with this pattern that we're in, you're not getting high snow ratio events. All right. So here's how your snow ratios typically play out. And you're going to notice it correlates a lot with the climate zones. It really does. All right. So south of this line, okay, you're talking less than or equal to a 5-to-1 snow ratio. What does that mean? Very, very wet. So what does that mean? You can probably take all of these numbers and cut them in half. At most, at the least, you could probably cut these and probably cut it by 3. So divide everything by 3 or 4 in some cases. That's how much you can cut these things in half, because this is assuming a 10-to-1 snow ratio. And on average, March snows do not produce 10-to-1 snow ratios. And we're seeing that tonight. So once you get within this zone in here, you get 10-to-1 snow ratios. These areas, where are you talking about greater than a 10-to-1 snow ratio? Your subarctic region, okay? So this area in here is 10-to-1 on average. And then this area is greater than or equal to 10-to-1, okay, on average, okay? So this is why you want to tame your expectations. And as I'll show you as we get into each of the individual members, you're going to see that sometimes in a place like New York City or DC, 5 members out of 20 are going to skew the whole entire ensemble. So printing out these sorts of totals, right? I'm telling you right now, these totals in here are not happening. From southeastern Virginia to North Carolina, they're not happening. Okay. And some are showing even more. If you look at the euro, it's gone down quite a bit. It was showing a little bit more further south. Still think this is too high. If you look at the GFS ensembles, notice it's actually tamed its expectations quite a bit, right? This goes out through March 8th. If we go back a few runs, I feel like there was more at one point. Yeah, see, there was more at this particular point. But if we go back to 18Z, yeah, see, this in here is way too high. It's showing around the 9. Anyways, most of this is nonsense. All right, most of it is nonsense. I don't see it happening. All right, and there's a reason to this. The teleconnections just aren't there. Okay, everybody's talking about the EPO, right? That's what everybody's talking about because that's going negative, right? But it's not going. I've seen it more negative than this year. That's number one. Number two, it's also going to be going negative only for a little while, and then it's going to be going up positive, right? If we look at the GFS ensembles, same idea, right? Canadian ensembles, it actually has it going a lot less negative. So the question is, how negative is this EPO going to be going? All right. But that's not the only oscillation we focus on, right? The AO, that is the most important, one of the most important oscillations that you can look at. And notice right now we're about to go into this little briefly negative phase. So we go back up and then we kind of dip again. All right. And these little dips in here are going to allow New England to get cold. If you look at the GFS ensemble, same thing. Euro ensemble, same exact thing. But for the most part, we are staying positive. That does not bode well for winter lovers. All right. I'm talking about, I'm hearing constantly people saying, oh, there's a stratospheric warming event and all of this other stuff. And I'm just like, well, yeah, I don't see it. Right. I really don't see what everybody is all this hype. All right. I don't see the hype. I don't see it. NAO. This could be a little bit interesting, right? This is on the Euro ensemble. It dropped. It is the NAO could be dropping a little bit, but here's the issue, right? Is it going negative, right? And this is around the time frame that supposedly everything's going to be. We're going to be getting a big thing. It's still positive. It's still positive. GFS is staying positive. Canadian is staying positive. All right. So that's an issue. That is a major, major issue because what the NAO does is it allows the pattern to kink. And with it only dipping a little bit, right? Even if we take the most outlying scenario, which is the control, which is down here, right? Where you get down in here, that still doesn't bode well for areas like north of DC or south of DC. I mean, that would be like a New England or a northern mid-Atlantic sort of situation. It would not be a south. All right. And why was everything so suppressed this year? The reason everything was so suppressed is because your AO was going so dramatically negative, and we're not seeing that. So this idea of a possible suppressed storm, although I could see it possibly happening, problem is the AO is too positive for that. PNA, this is your other issue that we're going to have to be fighting, right? Right now, we're kind of at the peak. And remember, when PNA is positive, that favors a ridge in the west and a trough in the east. But notice how we're kind of going to be going on this downward spiral over time. And I'm telling you, once the PNA is negative, and if we get the EPO to go positive at the same time, you're toast. Winter's over. Winter's over. So that is something that we really need to watch, and notice how the GFS is just crashing this. All right. And I look at that more than anything. All right. I really look at that more than anything. So with all of that combined together, all right, here's my forecast points. Be looking at lots of warm weather opportunities for areas south of I-76 or south of that 40-degree north latitude line. All right. And especially south of I-66, which runs from DC into the northern parts of Virginia up to I-81 south of Winchester, Virginia. Okay. And this is through the whole period. All right. North of I-76 and especially I-80 will see a lot of fluctuations. So sometimes you'll be warm, sometimes you'll be really cold. A lot of days you're going to be ending up somewhere into the upper 30s and lower 40s. We're going to be looking at a cooler period for areas south of I-76 from the 7th to the 11th. All right. And in a lot of cases, this is probably only going to, the worst of it will probably last a day or two. This will feature at to slightly below average conditions, especially closer to I-76. Cold air for areas north of I-76 and especially north of I-80. All right. Full-blown spring weather arrives for mid-March. And this is for everybody. All right. This is for everybody. From 3/11 onward, south of I-66, first potential 80-plus degree day. For those who haven't seen it yet. North of I-66, but south of I-80, you'll get your first 70-plus degree day, I think. And north of I-80, you'll get your first 60-degree day. And this is after the 11th. So this is 3/11 and onward. Okay. Snow chances away from the mountains will dwindle by 3/11. Okay. Prior to 3/11, areas north of I-66 have a chance at some accumulations. However, the more significant accumulation should be reserved for areas north of I-80 and especially north of I-90. And that's the general points between now and mid-March. And so here's a map. I made it out. Is winter done? Well, yeah. Winter is over in central and southern Virginia and North Carolina. Not to say you can't get a cold day here and there, but for the most part, yeah, winter is over. Winter's over. In this lighter tan color, it's mostly done. You have a very slight risk of a little snow, 3/7 to 3/10, but it's not looking good. It's not looking good. And even in this lighter blue zone, which is like a lot, which is a lot of us, right? So you have Burlington, you have Albany, you have, even the Valley of New Hampshire and most of Massachusetts, all of Connecticut, all of Rhode Island, New York City, Philadelphia, Harrisburg. Do I think you're going to get bolsterous snow totals? Absolutely not. We'll get into my general thoughts when we get into each individual area, but winter will definitely be done between 3/11 and 3/26 for these areas. There's no question about that. I think it's the chances are starting to go down with each and every day, because each and every day we are gaining 2.5 minutes of sunlight. So that is an issue. In these dark blue zones, All right, so the Adirondacks, central and northern New York, the Green Mountains and the northern Berkshires, most of New Hampshire, especially in the mountains, northern and western Maine and the Maine mountains. Yeah, after the 26th of March is when winter will be done. So you have a lot of winter left up in here. Not much in here. Not much. I mean, is it over yet? Not really, but it's definitely on its last legs, as we're gonna see. And in here, it's mostly done. You have a very small risk in about a week, but before that and after that, you're primarily looking at mostly spring-like weather. And in here, in this red zone, it's done. It's over with. It's like shut off. Winter is done. The cold air is shut off. It's shut off. So let's get into the data. I'm going to start up in New Hampshire, and it's going to get cold. I'm not going to lie. It's going to get cold. This is national blend of models, and this cold look. It's cold look. You're going to get cold for a couple days. Sunday and Monday, going to get very cold up there in New Hampshire. So don't put them winter coats away because you're going to need them. So enjoy these next few days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, where you're talking those temperatures into the 30s and 40s. And then really enjoy Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week. So you're going to want to do that. Let's go to the Euro ensembles and see what it's suggesting and see how it's starting to warm up. What I want to do here is I want to sort of see. So here's one thing I do want to say about the cool down that we get next week. Okay. It's not going to be as potent as this one. Okay. Because and you can see it, and you're going to notice it as we go further south that this is cool down number 1. This is cool down number 2. Cool down number 1 is more potent than cool down number 2. It's still going to be cold, but it's not going to be the amplitude of it isn't as crazy. It's a GFS ensembles, and you can kind of see that, right? Should I dare bring up the minimum temperatures? I mean, you're going to get below 0 in New Hampshire. Hate to break it to you. It's going to get nasty. Going to get very, very nasty. See that? So get ready for that. Okay, you're really going to want to get ready for that. It's going to feel like a very cold winter day. Like Sunday and Monday. So winter won't feel like it's over. Okay, it really won't. Let's look at what the data is suggesting as far as total snow. Look, some of this might be a little overdone for tonight. That's the issue. All right. You're probably going to end up with about 2 or 3 inches. So you have to cut this down by about an inch or 2. So if we go back to this, right, we have to cut it down by about 2 or 3 inches. So we have to cut everything down by 2 or 3 inches. Notice, though, the data is suggesting sometime around the 9th, we got to watch, right? That's when you're getting a bigger storm. This is a bigger amplitude storm. So we'll be watching that up in New Hampshire. I think New Hampshire has a chance. I do. I think New Hampshire has a chance of getting a big one. And climatology would suggest that's where you're going to get it, right? That's where climatology would suggest that you would get a big boisterous snowstorm. Longer range, look, I see it's going to start warming up. Okay, after this second cold period, I'm not seeing much in the way of very cold weather after that, right? Not to say that it can't get chilly in New Hampshire in late March and April, but you know, it starts warming up even up in those parts. All right, we're going to move to Bennington now. This is Bennington, New Hampshire. Going to actually start with the national blend. Yeah, it's going to get cold. Ken, get ready. Get those winter coats out. It's going to be cold, okay? Overnight lows in the single digits to below zero, and then you're going to warm up. Going to skyrocket, and I mean it, just skyrocket, going up near 24-hour temperature change of like almost 20 degrees. Ridiculous. 2-day temperature change from Monday to Wednesday. You're talking like a near 30 degree temperature change. Just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So be ready for that. That's going to be a shock to the system. All right. This is the data for Euro Ensemble data. And you notice it's a big drop here, right? From 42 to 25 to 16. So in a 48-hour period, you're dropping like 30 degrees. You see that? You're dropping like 30 degrees, a little over, but you get the idea. And then you're rising in 24 hours, like over 15 degrees. It's just a remarkable temperature swing. Then you kind of go down for a few days, and then you go back up, right? And this is the pattern change. Around the 11th, it's a pattern change. All right, it's a real pattern change. Now, the question is, does New England get affected by it? I don't know at this point. All right, here's the GFS ensembles. By the way, I'm going to bring up the Euro ensembles and see what it's suggesting. Yeah, there's some warming here, but we got to watch out. There's also some model data saying it's going to stay chilly up in New England. And we saw that on the GFS operational. And I do want to sort of caution that, it might not be as arctically cold as this, but if you get an easterly flow, right? If you get an easterly flow off the water, you're not getting a northerly flow, right? So you're not going to be dropping into like the teens and 20s, but you might be only into the upper 30s, right? Which is not bad for the Bennington area or New Hampshire or Vermont. But the problem is there's this serious boundary that sets up somewhere, and that's gonna be interesting. That's gonna be interesting. So we'll be watching that. But it does look like it's gonna warm up even up in Vermont. But notice that the warm up might not be too extreme in Vermont. So we'll see what happens. But gonna warm up. It's gonna be nice. It's just there could be stuff to hinder that. So just keep that in mind up there. This is in the Boston area, and yeah, we'll be dropping into the lower to middle 30s. Overnight lows just ridiculously cold. It's on the national blend of models, but look at the next few days. It's going to be really, really nice. So just get out there and enjoy it. We bring up the Euro ensembles, and you see it's going to drop. It may even drop below freezing. You rise, and then you drop again. But notice this drop here isn't as ridiculous as this drop. So we'll see what happens. And then we start rising. We start rising up. So if we look at this, you notice how it starts really warming up in here. But again, we have to watch out for any possible boundaries. I think New England has the highest risk of that. Highest risk of getting a possible boundary setting up. This is a GFS ensembles. It does look like we're going to be warming things up. And we will be watching for that. Canadian ensemble. Canadian is a little bit more bullish and a little bit more enthused at a significant warm-up for New England. So we'll see what happens. Let's look at the total snow. We didn't do that for Bennington, but it's generally the same as New Hampshire. So, notice you get possibly something coming in here. Possibly. All right. Again, would I put stock into the high totals? No. At this particular point in time, I think you're a storm dropping something like 2 to 4 is a possibility. I think that's your possibility up there. Maybe lower than that. Maybe more like 1 to 3, because this is dealing with a 10 to 1 ratio snow. Let's look at the GFS. I'm sure it's going a little bit more bullish. It is going a lot more bullish. Going a lot more bullish. But again, this is one of those instances where only a handful of data is skewing the whole thing. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of data that are skewing the whole thing. If it wasn't for those 5 pieces of data, you'd probably be talking about a mean around where the euro was, which is like around 3 inches or so, maybe even lower than that. So I wouldn't. This is why I like having this, because you can dig into it and you can really see the extent and how a few outliers can just sway the whole thing. On the whole, if you look at what most of this data is suggesting, it's generally a 2 to 4 sort of situation. And again, that's based off of a 10-to-1 snow ratio, and you don't get 10-to-1 snow ratios typically in March. So therefore, I would probably go about 1 to 3. Canadian ensemble, notice it's warming up. You look at the individual members, it's looking pretty good. We look at the total snow. And again, this is one of those situations where there's quite a few. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members showing 0. All right, 5 members showing 0, but you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members showing big blizzards. I don't like predicting that. So therefore, I think you have to cut these out. You really do. And until I get notified otherwise, I'm going to throw them out and I'm going to get rid of them. So at this particular point in time, the Canadian ensembles are actually the least bullish, even though if you were to take it verbatim, it's showing the most. And at this particular point in time, this would definitely be only about an inch or 2, because you're not getting a big blizzard like that. Hate to break it to you. All right. Some people are getting giddy about that, but that's just not happening. All right. Here's the extended range, and you can see it's going to definitely be warming up. Then you go to the euro, and you can definitely see that warm up is going to take place. But again, New England, not as incredible, right? You're not seeing big bright colors because, well, New England, you have, when you get that onshore flow during the months of March and April, it can get cold and raw. All right, and rainy and kind of dreary and cloudy. So you have to watch out for that. But if you can get full-blown sunny days, oh, it can be gorgeous. All right, so that's in the Boston area. We're going to go into the Springfield area, and this is what it's suggesting. It's going to get cold. We're going to get below freezing, all right? And then we look at the Euro ensembles and see what it's suggesting. You're going to get cold. It's going to warm up. You're going to cool down, and then you're going to kind of warm up again, right? You can kind of see that. Again, we're going to have to watch here for the extended range, see if there's any boundaries that we're going to be needing to really pin down, right? That sort of stuff you won't get to know until you get closer to the event, right? So we're going to be watching that. New England, the Euro or GFS ensembles are not as bullish on how warm it's going to get because of the fact that there's quite a number of these that are showing upper 30s and lower 40s, right? See that? There's quite a large number of them. You know, I don't think it's going to get into the 20s during this time, but there's quite a big number of these where you're in the upper 30s, lower 40s because of that onshore flow with that boundary coming in. So we have to watch for that. That's something that we're going to need to monitor. But if you don't have that boundary, then, oh my goodness, sky is the limit. You could get well up over 60 degrees. And I still think one day you could do it, but then you might have that boundary kind of crashing south. So we have to watch that boundary. That's going to be very, very important if that sort of boundary takes shape. Let's see what the snow totals are looking like. Yeah, same deal, like a 2 to 4 sort of situation in the Springfield area. That's the Euro ensembles. I'm sure the GFS is showing more. Yeah, maybe a little over 4, but I wouldn't bank on too much. Wouldn't bank on too much. Yeah, the Canadian ensembles. If you kind of erase these big huge members, you're not getting much. Maybe a couple or a few inches at best in the Springfield area. It's a long range, and I do see indicators of kind of this up and down kind of continuing in the Springfield area, where some days are cool, some days are warm, but you're not going to get nearly as cold as what we've been, right? And that's the general look I'm seeing on the data here in New England. Um, and that's typically how early spring is. It's kind of, you get fluctuations. Okay, let's go to Albany right now. We're going to go to Albany, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the temperatures there. Pretty much the same thing. This is the national blend of models. This is the Euro ensembles, bringing those up. Notice those temperatures are going to start rising there. I think, there's a possibility, though, still that Albany could get impacted by those boundaries. But I would say coastal New England has the highest risk. But you still have to watch out. This is not all that dramatically high for total snowfall. I would say probably on the order of about 4, 5, or 6 inches, according to the Euro ensembles. GFS ensembles are not as bullish on the temperatures. Total snow, we'll be watching that one storm event. And then here comes the Canadian. And again, the Canadian's not all that bullish on temperatures in the Albany area. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, it doesn't look remarkably incredible when I look at everything, you know. And again, same idea in the Albany area, kind of up and down, the fluctuation sort of stuff. All right, let's go to New York City. And this is a situation. You're going to get cold nights dropping back. And especially if you get north and west of the city, it's going to be cooler than this. But New York City, according to the National Blend of Models, you're still going to be above freezing both Sunday and Monday, and the lows overnight in the 20s. Now, I'm sure the Euro ensembles are showing differently, right? 35, that's not actually much different. There's the 16, and then, you start warming up. You start warming up, and it does look like there's more of a warmer look in New York City, right? There's no question about that. You look at the GFS ensembles, and it's pretty glaringly obvious, right? You see that it's a lot warmer than when you were up in New England, right? Canadian ensembles, it's very glaring, right? You're even getting some members showing near 70. So it's pretty glaringly obvious that you're going to get New York City has a higher risk of getting warm because of sometimes it depends on the orientation of the boundary. If it's like a boundary that kind of swings, then you got to watch in New York City. But if it's like a north to south sort of boundary, well, look, New York City typically is south of those, right? Usually those sort of set up from I-84 down to I-80 is typically how it goes, and New York City is typically south and east of those. But it depends on the orientation. Once in a while, even New York City gets involved. Even South Central Pennsylvania can get involved, right? So you have to watch these boundaries. Early spring brings these interesting boundaries that you just got to watch. So that's something I'm going to be watching. So that's New York City. But in general, are we looking at a lot of snow? Let's actually bring that up before we go to the next zone here. Yeah, I wouldn't say a lot. That's the Euro ensembles. The mean is somewhere around an inch to an inch and a half. Not a lot. Not a lot. GFS ensembles, same thing. It's, if you take out this 18-inch nonsense and you even take out the 6-inch nonsense, you're not getting it, because you're not getting 6 inches. I don't think. Be very shocked if you did. Oh yeah, and here's the thing with the Canadian ensembles. You know what it's doing, and this is why I look at these, because the Canadian ensembles, the mean is up by 4, right? But look at the numbers of members that are showing 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 members are showing nothing. But then what it does to compensate for that is there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members that are showing these big, monstrous numbers. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. And not going to happen. Certainly those 4 aren't going to happen, but I would even say that's not going to happen. So you can kind of throw all those away, right? You can throw them away. And people say, "Oh, well, the pattern isn't supportive. It just isn't. The NAO ain't negative. The AO ain't negative. The PNA is starting to dip negative, which isn't good. And the EPO is only marginally negative. I don't see it. I don't see it. Good for the mountains, but not good for New York City. Maybe you squeeze out a coating to an inch over there. You're going to get warmer. You're going to get warmer in New York City. After the 12th, you're done with winter. You're toast. I mean, you're toast. It's done. It's Jover. It's absolutely Jover. So don't expect much. Don't expect much. We're going to go down to South Central Pennsylvania. And you notice that, we're going to be dropping here. The next couple of the days, though, we're still above freezing in South Central PA. But watch out. Those overnights are going to get really, really cold. Really, really cold. Hope you have them winter coats handy. It's going to be very cold. So here's your warm-up next week. We get cool, but is this the sign that winter is back? No. It really isn't, right? This is kind of winter, right? That's kind of winter. But is this winter? It's chilly, but it's not winter. That doesn't scream winter to me. Here's the GFS ensembles. Maybe here, maybe a little, but that's still. Even this in here, it's a day, and then the next day it's up to 30 set. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I don't even know if you have much winter here, but we'll say possibly. This is just like this is your winter, and then all of this in here, it's done. It's totally toast. I'm not seeing it. And then I look at the individual members. This is your cool down for next week. I'm seeing a remarkable number of members for South Central Pennsylvania, still in the upper 40, between 40 and 48. That's a really high number for me. All right. And then here comes the warm-up. Okay, there's your warm-up for the pattern change, and it's going to get warm. We know this. We know this. Looking at the GFS, I mean, it's pretty clear at this point. You look at the Canadian ensembles, it's even warmer than that. I mean, you have a remarkable number of 70s. You even have, a couple members here and there showing near 80. It's done. I mean, it's done in South Central PA. A winter that really never started, right? It's more pain and agony. So here's Philly. It's kind of the same idea. You have a little bit of winter for a couple days on Sunday and Monday, but after that, Is 43 to 45 winter? With overnight lows barely below freezing? I'd argue no. Not for Philly. Not for Philly. And then I see some of these members in here with this cool down that everybody's getting all giddy about. Some of the members are near 50 in Philly, so I don't see it. Maybe the GFS is right, maybe, but you're getting warm. There's no question Philly's getting warm by the 11th. That's for darn sure. We know this. We definitely know this. And look, I mean, in Philly, it's pretty clear after the 11th, you're done with winter. You're done with winter. But I would even argue you're after the cool period, Sunday and Monday, you're done with winter. Actually, I would say that. That's in Philly. Time to go to DC, where I'd argue winter's over. Winter is over. I mean, this is the best that you can do. 42 to 45 with this very cold period. I don't. That's, maybe the Euro ensembles are a little more accurate. Oh my goodness, 38. But is that really winter? This is not winter by any stretch of the imagination. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's not winter, and then you're skyrocketing after that. I mean, you're talking 70s. You're talking 70s getting into DC. There's no question DC's getting to 70. No question at all. I think that's a pretty good bet right now. Pretty good bet. I would, I wouldn't lay my life on it. And then this cool down. Look at this, right? This cool down in here. Look at that. You're getting a remarkable number of members still showing near 50. Yeah, it's over. It's over. I don't even need to look at the snow totals to know that whatever they're printing out is utter nonsense. You don't get snow with these temperatures. You just don't. They're banking on one something random happening. Yeah, it's gonna get. You want to talk about a furnace? The furnace is gonna get turned on here very quickly. Very quickly in DC. Yeah, see that? It's those cherry blossoms are going to be blooming very quickly up in DC. It's going to be happening very quickly. Very, very quickly. Let's do it. Let's move down here to Southern Virginia, and if you want to see what spring looks like, this is it. Now, the only thing that you watch out for is them overnight lows. But other than that, I mean, during the daytime, look how warm we're getting. Look how warm we're getting. Our cold snap is in the low to mid 40s. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, it is just so over. I don't even know how to describe. Yeah, it's just over. It's just over. By the end of the period, you're getting mid 70s on average. You're probably going to get warmer than that. The GFS ensembles, yeah, it's going back up. Yeah, it's just way too darn warm. Yeah, it's over. It's so over. I mean, and like I said, I don't even need to look at the snow totals. It's gonna warm up, and this mid-month period, man, you can see it. It's very glaringly obvious. I mean, I don't know how to explain this period between the 12th and the 20th. that is going to be a warm period. Woof, man. That is going to be warm down here in Virginia. We're going to be 70s every day, pretty much. Every single day, with probably some days around 80. But I mean, the whole period is just warm. Whole period. What happens when you get close to the beaches? Now, here in there's a sea breeze near Norfolk. So what ends up happening is it sometimes is a little cooler. Notice it's not a big difference. Sometimes you get a difference in the overnight lows. That's where you sometimes get a difference. But yeah, I mean, in general, it's the same idea. It's the same exact idea. Data's a little cooler, but that's because if you get an onshore flow or a flow coming from the bay, it brings the cold air in. But that's a northerly flow. But either way, you can definitely tell that for the most part, winter is pretty much over with. Here's the GFS ensembles. And again, this is for the beaches. So it's not going to show as hot or as warm as areas further inland. But notice the overnight low temperatures are much warmer. That's because of, again, the marine influence. But again, the general idea is the same. Winter is over. Let's go to Rocky Mount. So for northern North Carolina, you notice we're back up to what we've been talking about lately, right? And this is what we see for the longer range. And you can see it's just going to get very, very nice as we get towards the middle of March. It really is. I mean, I do believe that there's going to be 70s and 80s. I do believe that. It's going to get remarkably warm for the region. And then, yeah, I mean, I just see this warmth continuing. It doesn't really break down. And that's what happens down in these parts. That's part of that subtropical climate is it takes so much energy to break down it doesn't take a lot of energy for warm air to surge in. It takes a lot more energy to break down these warm patterns. It takes so much energy. Southern North Carolina, man, you're just going to notice, we're not dropping below 52. It's just Virginia, North Carolina are just so done with winter. It's just I don't know how else to describe it other than that winter is just so over. It's just so over. Yeah, it's just so over. So in general, I know I've gone on for a little while, probably longer than I would like, but the general theme here is if you live north of I-80, you have some winter left. Between I-80 and DC, it's questionable. You might have 1 or 2 more chances at most. And then south of DC, it's done. It's done. Winter over. Winter over. I might even have to bring this light tan up like this. Now, I think it's very over for a lot of people. And again, you're on when I say New York City, it's primarily temperature-wise that winter isn't over with. For a lot of these areas, it's primarily temperature-wise. As far as snowfall, it's a lot of us are done. A lot of us are done. And even if you're in the north, like the New England and the Albany area and areas like that, the most that you're looking at during this period of time is about 8 to 12 inches. All right. Most people are going to be seeing like about 2 to 4, right? For most of Massachusetts. You quickly drop off as you go through Connecticut. And by the time you get to New York City, it's a coating to an inch, maybe a couple inches if you're lucky. By the time you get to Philly, it's at best a coating. Then you get south of there, and snow chances are just so darn low. Everything has to work out just perfectly. It's very hard to do. And everybody says, "Oh, well, there's been this winter and that winter," and they point to the blizzard of '93, and you can point to anything and almost show anything that you would like and when it comes to weather. But you have to have some sort of baseline that you base your forecast off of. And I try to base my forecast off of three things, and I'm going to finish off with this: climate and historical weather of an area, the weather pattern, and the technical details. That's what I base my forecasts off of. And sometimes it doesn't work out, but in 95% of the time it does. Or maybe not 95, but generally between 75 and 90% of the time it generally works out pretty good. And climate doesn't usually let you down most of the time. Sometimes it does, but you basically go with what's the most likely. I will say this, okay? The Euro has been showing a storm that possibly gets suppressed. Let's play this what if game for a moment. If we do get a storm that's suppressed to the south, what would happen? Based off of the data that I'm seeing, what would happen is obviously it wouldn't be nearly as warm, but what would end up happening is you would end up getting a storm that rides over, the Gulf, or rides over, maybe northern Florida, southern Georgia. And what would end up happening is you would just get a lot of rain. It would be a lot of rain. It would be a rainstorm, and it would be very fast moving. It would never merge with the northern stream, and it would just be another cold day in New England. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the solution that verifies during this period, where you get the South, right, during this period, right, sometime during this period, especially here. This is in Lumberton, by the way, far southern North Carolina. It wouldn't shock me one bit if Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina over to Tennessee and parts of Alabama and Georgia end up getting a big rainstorm from a surface low, and that moves through, and that ends up producing a rainstorm. But other than that, I think it's generally over as far as snow. Maybe obviously the mountains of Tennessee and North Carolina will probably get some snow. Be a lot? Probably not. And so it's generally done is my general theme here. So that's it for now, guys. That was the live stream. This will be posted to YouTube, and we will be doing a diagnostic of the winter tomorrow. All right, Friday, I should say. So we will be doing that on Friday. But you guys take care, and you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of wonderful Thursday, and we'll see you Friday evening sometime. Take care.